Welcome to episode 12 of the YoJoeShow Podcast. Let's start with some highlights.
And that's why you have this talented young man singing this song mocking the pharmaceutical industry.
Is your hunger a source of guilt and shame? Did they tell you your DNA's to blame? Did they sell you an injection just to help stand your reflection? Did the doctor recommend this novel way? Chemical-assisted self-starvation, it's the biggest fad in all the nations.
Yes, we can talk.
We can talk.
We can talk.
We can talk with accents.
Oh, I think that would be marvelous fun.
Yes, it is very fun. But
yes, it is very good.
It's very fun.
I can talk.
Yes.
We can talk.
No more silence. Okay, what do you think of that?
So it's impressive, especially the fact that they use all these different movie styles and all these different time periods. Elon has a great way of simplifying problems, and the way he simplifies this problem is that we currently live in a three-dimensional world, especially in dense cities where buildings can have 50 or 100 stories.
Not about that.
And then
it's
you
about
have
what's required to make the robot dance the way that it's dancing. And if it could do this, it means it has the fine motor skills to do other things, such as working in a factory, doing household chores, and so forth.
walking down the streets.
Absolutely. It is to see is quite a thing. So I think when Tesla put out the video, it wasn't just like, oh, it can dance. Okay, great. I guess it's great if you're going to a nightclub and you don't have someone to go with, but that's not the intent. They're in an art gallery and they're essentially pointing the smartphone at artwork and speaking to the chatbot.
Sense of solitude.
Can you create a story around this picture?
It's a chilly evening in the city. A Tuesday, perhaps. The woman, perhaps named Eleanor, sits alone in the diner. She is feeling melancholy due to the uncertainty of her future and the weight of unfulfilled dreams. The scene freezes in time, only the flow of ideas moving onward.
That line, only the flow of ideas moving onward? I wish I'd written that.
We need to improve our knowledge of cancer. We need to improve really how we do things. And for anyone that's questioning, going, that's sugar, how could that have anything to do with cancer? When you go to be examined to determine definitively if you have cancer, one of the tests that's done is called a PET scan. And a PET scan is a CT scan that uses an injection of sugar that's laced with radiation. When I discovered that the navigation software was actually causing the bulk of the problem, because a lot of the traffic going through there normally would have never gone through there.
And so as a result, our students are able to learn twice as fast in only a couple of hours a day compared to students that are in a traditional classroom.
Mackenzie Price co-founded this AI-driven school.
How much sugar in the sugar-free Tic Tac?
Austin!
There's no sugar in the sugar-free Tic Tac.
Oh, you've done so well up to this point.
Is it sugar-free doesn't mean there's no sugar, does it?
Breaking news, everything is bad. It's just as terrible as you imagined, and probably worse. With more, we go to Tom Lee Cruz. Tom Lee.
We're all in danger, Dan Lee.
Jesus Christ, what can we do?
Absolutely nothing.
It was good knowing you, Tom Lee.
I can't say the same.
That was unnecessary. We're just now getting in reports that all the children have exploded. They will be missed. Let's check in with Olivia Lee Rodrigo. Olivia Lee, where are you?
That's none of your business.
Do you have trouble picking what to watch? Does mailing things confuse you? Are you experiencing your own independent thoughts? Then Monodrex might be right for you. Monodrex is a treatment that takes all the guesswork out of thinking. Monodrex acts as a simple brain inhibitor, shutting down parts of the brain that you don't use and most of the parts that you do use. Monodrex is made with all natural chemicals plus 2 of the leading poisons. And simply
You presided here, I think, for 32 years. You presided over the destruction of the health of the American people.
Well,
Our people are now the sickest people in the world.
Seriously.
Because you have
Mr.
not done your job.
Seriously. That is an
What have you done about it? What have you done about the epidemic of chronic disease?
Mr.
President of the
Secretary,
United States. Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
Hey, I just want to let you guys know, you guys have a lady back here. She got no teeth, asking for a Big Mac with no onions and a small milkshake in exchange for sex.
Stop it. I'll let my manager know. Can I take your order?
Let me get a Big Mac with no onions and a small milkshake.
You are nasty.
All right, now let's join Yo and Joe for this and much, much more in episode 12.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to the YoJoeShow Podcast. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Yo, how's it going?
Awake and alive.
Yeah, I'm here. Heart's beating, lungs are working. We're back for another episode.
But a really entertaining one this time around. I think it'll be funny and enjoyable and a little bit kind of light-themed. Just easygoing and a fun conversation for all to be had.
We have a lot of topics. We did, I think, have to cut out a few or we'd be here for the next 10 hours. But I think we picked some fun topics, some interesting things, maybe a little different perhaps for some of them. But I thought I'd start with something funny that you haven't even seen yet. Is that fair? I can bring something.
I always love when you surprise me live.
So there's been quite a few things in the news this week. But I'll start with one actually good piece of news, which essentially has a reduction in taxes for a lot of people, is moving well on its way. And it was a campaign promise by the Trump administration. And it actually succeeded in making its way through the Senate. And rather than me say it, here's the Babylon Bee breaking the news.
No tax on tips passes Senate unanimously after clarification that bribes can count as tips. That is very good.
It's not common to have 100 votes versus 0, and all 100 votes voted for this, which is great, which I think it was a terrific idea, and it was a terrific campaign.
It's so good that the Biden administration decided to copycat it.
Yeah, the Harris campaign tried to somehow, which was really ridiculous because it was after it was already announced at a Trump rally, tried to say it was their idea, but it wasn't certainly in this case. But the good news is that bipartisan politicians got together and now one of them had the nerve not to pass this. And I think that's great news for a lot of people that do earn tips. But I think it's, of course, the Babylon Bee. Who else would have such an amusing twist on things as to explain how they were able to get it through at 100-0 votes? Not sure if that's why it got through, but I'm glad it did. And we're one step closer to actually eliminating taxes on tips. When I'm at a restaurant or other service facility, but definitely at the restaurants, I always ask, are there any politicians back in the kitchen helping out? And they're like, no. Or have any ever come to help clear the table or serve the food? I've never seen any here. Any politician, state, federal, local, whatever. I've never seen that happen. And they say, no. I said, well, and if I leave a tip, I would expect it to go right to you and it not be taxed and go to the government. For them to misappropriate for something that we probably don't want to have it misappropriated to. As we covered in great length in the past few episodes, including the last episode, with stadiums being rented and Caesar's Palace being rented and so forth. So we want to make sure our money maybe stays in the hands of the people we're handing it to when it's a tip. So I just thought that you'd find that amusing, but it is good news, certainly. And we at least want to start off with some good breaking news that things are moving ahead with, and I'm pretty sure that's going to pass at this point, the way things are going.
Yeah, that is a very Joe thing to tell a server at a restaurant after he leaves them 30% ridiculously high tip for horrible service.
I don't get tips for bad service. I try to make sure that the service, that if there's bad service, I try to fix it. I can't help myself. But I do want to
manager watch out.
I do want to tip well. Ultimately, if there's a problem, my goal is always to fix it beforehand. So that when when the time comes, I have no reason but to not give a good tip. That's just the way it is. And it's fair, but that's why I take particular annoyance with the idea that there is taxes on tips. I just think that shouldn't be happening. So I was pretty excited to hear that was I think it was a great campaign idea, and it's nice when you see the promises made, promises kept. In this case, that is happening. We'll get on to some more interesting news. Maybe just talk a little bit more about some of the things as to how government works and some of the things that we understand really is happening behind the scenes when we hear from all our politicians.
Yeah, but just to touch on the no tax on tips, I think During Trump's first administration, he was labeled the president for the billionaires, this president for businesses, the president for the millionaires. He hates the working people, he hates the working class. And what we're seeing right here is real practical life benefits that will drastically improve the lives of the really hardworking working class. And it shows appreciation for those people. And like we mentioned in past episodes, when you hear personal anecdotes about Trump, it seems like he always talks to the waiters and the security guards and the valet attendants, and he just tries to talk to people, even if they're simple people. It's what he made his brand about almost. Now we're seeing that no tax on tips and then no tax on overtime. Hopefully that passes as well. That's extremely valuable for the working people. And then what Howard Lutnick has discussed of theoretically no taxes on anybody earning below $150,000 shows real care for the working people of America. So those narratives that the media were trying to push were fake and false, and we'll be discussing this topic. They like spreading a lot of fear.
Yeah, I think realistically, all the haters aside, it doesn't matter whose political team you're on. Trump grew up around the construction industry. He built cities. So it's ridiculous to think that this guy doesn't have a blue collar streak in him, despite how much he may have in assets and net worth. It's not about that. It's the type of upbringing, the type of people he was around when he was growing up, and then ultimately succeeded in business as an adult. It's hard to just be an ivory tower running these kinds of businesses if you don't connect with the people. And again, as I mentioned, I think in one of the earlier episodes, I spoke with someone that used to golf with him periodically and described him as being a guy that would take the shirt off his back, and he was the kindest person. Except if you were in a business negotiation with him, he wanted to win and he wanted to obviously get the deal done. But on a personal level, the stories that I heard,
or if you crossed him or offended him or anything like that, boy, can he come after you.
Yeah, if someone steps on his feet, he stomps back pretty hard. Again, it is what it is. I tend to have that personality as well. I don't like people stepping on my feet either, but it's understandable. It just, he's got more clout than I do for sure. But listen, I understand where he's coming from, and I see the things that are being done. And certainly on this show, we judge based on on performance and what we're actually seeing. Things are right or wrong. It doesn't matter. It's not about supporting your team, so to speak. It's about basically talking about what we're seeing and what we've seen. I'm not a big fan of politics. There's very few politicians I actually like. I've a friend who's in elected office. I have a couple of other people that I know that are politicians, but I'm not a big fan of politics because I think it has inherent problems in it. And there's a lot of corruption and a lot of the decisions that are made. Certainly the higher up you go in the federal level, especially, some of the decisions being made aren't what the people think are being made, or they're being made for different reasons.
I think what you said earlier, where he doesn't tolerate people stepping on his feet and he will stomp back, I think that's the reason why so many Americans voted for him, because Americans have had the feeling that over the last number of decades, the world, other countries, the U.S. administrations of both parties were really stepping on the American people's feet, and they felt that nobody was there to have their back. And they really voted in a president they felt could stomp back next time somebody steps on their feet. And debatable, but that could be a categorization of what we're seeing with these trade deals, is for so many years have been taking the U.S. for advantage. And now it's time to pay a 10% tax to sell to the number one market on planet Earth. And therefore, he's initiating this tax in the form of tariffs on basically every other country, because every other country, every other business around the world's number one objective is to sell to the United States, to the biggest market, to the most lucrative market of them all. So it can raise prices on the end consumer, but as long as this Lutnick-Trump plan does happen to replace federal income tax under $150,000 for the tariffs, then it's a wash, and it'll probably be much better for the American people, because at the end of the day, it will help grow the economy drastically.
Yeah, and that would explain why there's less concern about removing certain taxes right now, income tax, because the end goal, if it's achievable, would be to remove income tax from a big chunk of the population, from the majority of the taxpayers, of the actual numbers of taxpayers. We'll see what happens, and that would revert the United States back to the way it used to be, before there was an actual income tax in this country. So we'll see what happens. It is interesting. And as I was saying a moment ago, a lot of times when politicians do things, you question what those things are for and what they're all about. And endless wars, presence in all these different countries for questionable reasons. We've done a lot of nation building, but then you question where things end up. And they don't always end up the way we had hoped.
Yeah, so let's watch a video from the most honest lady ever who does not maintain a hit list. I want to reemphasize, she does not maintain a hit list.
A lot of the news about that this week as well, but we're not going to cover that here. Just for at least not for now. Not this episode. We'll see where all that plays out. But yeah, I think certainly to put things in perspective regarding how the U.S. has conducted foreign policy with regards to nation building and decisions regarding military strength and so forth, I think Hillary Rodham Clinton does a pretty good job of explaining, and she knows better than most people. Let's take a look.
Remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago. And we did it because we were locked in this struggle with the Soviet Union. They invaded Afghanistan, and we did not want to see them control Central Asia. And we went to work. And it was President Reagan in partnership with the Congress, led by Democrats, who said, you know what, sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's deal with the ISI and the Pakistani military, and let's go recruit these mujahideen. And that's great. Let's get some to come from Saudi Arabia and other places, importing their Wahhabi brand of Islam so that we can go beat the Soviet Union. And guess what? They retreated. They lost billions of dollars, and it led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So there's a very strong argument, which is, wasn't a bad investment to end the Soviet Union, but let's be careful what we sow because we will harvest. So we then left Pakistan. We said, okay, fine, you deal with the stingers that we've left all over your country. You deal with the mines that are along the border. And by the way, we don't want to have anything to do with you. In fact, we're sanctioning you. So we stopped dealing with the Pakistani military and with ISI, and we now are making up for a lot of lost time.
What do you think?
Yeah, so that's very interesting, of course. It's nice when the puppet masters pull back the veil and show a little bit of what's been going on behind the scenes. And obviously we've discussed it in the past that Al-Qaeda was formed by the CIA in order to fight the Soviets. And then the minute we left, they turned around and they used those same stingers, those same weapons to attack the United States. Basically, identify the ideologies of the people you're going to arm, because just make sure that they're fairly closely aligned with your ideologies, because otherwise it's pretty likely to come back and bite you.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's like a 3D chess. They're playing this game, and then we pull out, and then what happens? So we are having to deal with things that we created. And like she said, in her mind, it's obviously this is an older video, but it basically shows the pattern, and it shows the thinking in government, certainly in US government, because of our strength, because of our scope. We could literally change the dynamic of other countries. And you could say in the short term, she says it helped destabilize the USSR and it collapsed.
It did.
But then what? And where are we now? And all the terroristic acts and all these things that are happening. And politics makes strange bedfellows. It's really interesting, the people that we're being associated with, and where are we now? So that's Afghanistan, another one of these wars that she alludes to. Look what happens. They went, she mentioned the Russians, and then they wanted to push them back. What happened with Afghanistan for all those years? And then what did we do? Pulled right out. We lost lives that we shouldn't have lost. We left people behind that were supportive of the United States. We just abandoned them. We still remember the videos of people literally clinging to the military aircraft, leaving and falling off the plane. They were desperate to get out of there. It was just atrocious. I believe that there's actually, I think it was today that there was actually mentioned that there's going to be an investigation into the departure from Afghanistan and how that was conducted militarily. But that aside, you have to wonder, why have we been present in so many places for so long? And it's these endless wars that are supposedly there to somehow help the United States and the world. And you question, is that the primary goal?
So in a previous, maybe the episode before last, we discussed how with the war of Pakistan and India, how these terror attacks against India were caused by these terror organizations that were backed by the ISI, which is the Pakistani intelligence, who are notable for working with the United States and the CIA, but are also notable for funding the terrorist organizations that fight the United States. And what we're seeing here is this video must be like 30 plus years old. And even back then, we were funding the ISI to fund terrorism, basically. And when people complain about the spending in US aid and stuff like that, it's like a whole bunch of that money was going to fund terrorism. So just chop it, right? Just chop it. If there's anything really valuable, then it'll be transferred to the Department of State, and it seems what has happened. But the vast majority of that was just trying to influence the world, and not in a positive way. And that is something that needs to be investigated.
Ultimately, I think it's important to look back at some of this and understand really what was going on and make sure we're okay with it. That's all. And if we're not, to fix it and to make people accountable. And if we're okay with it, then to move forward. But it needs to be looked at. We're always saying, oh, that was in the past. We don't want to look at it. Afghanistan, again, prime example. People not only lost their lives, but it was, in my take, reckless how we left Afghanistan. And it just shouldn't have happened. And I think it painted a certain picture, an inadequacy of the U.S. military, which caused the door to open to some of the other things that unfolded militarily, because they felt the U.S. can't even leave Afghanistan without causing the mess that it had there and leaving all that equipment behind. Yes, they'll argue a lot of equipment was donated to the Afghans. Yeah, I understand. This is high end.
The Taliban.
But yeah, it wound up being in the hands of the Taliban. That was the bottom line. We have a clip from Julian Assange, who was the exiled WikiLeaks founder, and he speaks openly and publishes a lot of information that otherwise would have never been available. That's why he had to be in exile. But ultimately, there's a clip which talks about the Afghanistan war specifically and the U.S. operations there. I'm not sure if you saw it, but I'd like to put it up. It gives some context from his perspective as to why the U.S. is involved in all these things.
Let's take a look.
Because the goal is not to completely subjugate Afghanistan. The goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. That is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful war.
Nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it. If they had searched deep enough, if they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? That means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
I agree.
Yeah, those are two very interesting points. The first is that they're both intertwined, right? Because in democratic countries, the people don't want wars. It's expensive. It's very tax burdensome. It can end your life. You can forcefully be drafted. Just war isn't fun. It's pure hell. And like we saw with the Iraq War, that the American people were lied to and convinced to go after the weapons of mass destruction. I have no sympathy for Saddam Hussein. He was probably one of the most evil men in recent history. He was just completely destructive, even to his own family members. Just like pure, sheer evil and like psychopaths gone crazy with endless power and gold everywhere. And I'm very happy that his evil regime fell, but the United States did instead is said, hey, we got rid of this evil dictator, let's replace it with democracy. And then we had democratic elections. And in a country like Iraq, which is majority Shia, which is the minority in Islam, but was ruled by Saddam Hussein, who was Sunni, and then suddenly you come and you say, hey, let's have free elections, that means the majority rules. And now you just replaced a Sunni nation with a Shia nation because suddenly the majority is in control.
I agree. I think they're both important, but obviously he makes the point that a well-informed populace wouldn't want to. War is obviously the last possible option. No one wants that on the table for your family, your friends, and yourselves. Bottom line is, do we really want to, does anyone want to be at war? And the answer is no. And there's a certain cost that may come with those decisions, but they think it's a well-earned cost. It's people are expendable, buildings, entire cities collapsing might be just the cost of achieving whatever goal that they have, and then wondering where all the money's being funneled to. There's been a lot of criticism with the massive, now yet unaccounted for money going to the Ukraine. No one's saying that the U.S. shouldn't support the Ukrainian war and help out in the role that we have been, but there's been a lack of accountability, and to this day, we don't know where a lot of that money went. President Zelensky has admitted that openly, that all the money that people say that he received, he says he never actually received most of it. That being said, that's why when you hear the narrative in the media, when you hear people calling for this or that, when people are calling for peace, they want peace. It may not always mean what you think it means.
Sometimes they want a peace. And with that, let's turn it over to a very famous man who offed himself 76 years ago, the same day he married his wife, named Eva Braun. And it's a
satirical representation. Mel Brooks had a movie in the 80s called To Be or Not to Be. And it's a satirical, a comical story back during the Hitler era, during the war. And the Nazis were obviously doing bad things to people. And the story in the movie is that there was this couple, a husband and wife, who were actors, but they weren't particularly very good actors. And they had a theater, and they were using the theater to help Jews leave through what was called at the time the Polish underground. They were in Poland. They were trying to get them to sneak out. And to maintain the facade that they were operating just a theater, they were putting on performances. So here's a clip from one of the supposed performances, tongue-in-cheek, that they were putting on that was supposed to appease the Nazis. But the reason we're putting this on here is because the tongue-in-cheek humor of Mel Brooks is what comes to mind sometimes when you hear politicians talking about peace. But the peace they're looking for isn't solving the problem. They let one country bomb or terrorize another, and they suddenly want peace, but they don't necessarily want to end or solve the underlying problem. So this is an old clip. For those that haven't seen it, every time I hear people talking peace, I always ask myself, do they really mean peace, or what do they mean?
I don't want war. All I want is peace. 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 A little piece of Poland, a little piece of France, a little piece of Portugal and Austria perchance. A little slice of Turkey and all that entails. And then a piece of England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales. A little nip of Norway, a little spot of Greece, a little hunk of Hungary. Oh, what a lovely feast. A little bite of Belgium, and now for some dessert. Romania, Albania, and Russia wouldn't hurt.
So always be careful of people, politicians, calling for peace. We really do want peace, but not as portrayed in this clip by Mel Brooks.
Exactly. And anybody unfamiliar with Mel Brooks, he's a comedical genius. One of his masterpieces probably is The History of the World Part 1, and it is just phenomenal. Definitely worth watching a few Mel Brooks movies, maybe even going on a binge. It'll definitely make you laugh, that's for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Perhaps maybe the younger crowd, folks your age, may not be as familiar, but it is important. And when, again, it's for us to poke fun and satire at the words that we hear coming from the elected officials and the people that are supposedly having the best interest of everyone. Okay. And
especially those at the UN.
Yeah. So the UN has its own sort of unusual, for those not familiar, the UN doesn't always accomplish the kinds of things and goals that the stated mission is. And they have different parts of the UN that do supposedly different things, right? And we were talking about UNRWA earlier, right? They've been in the news.
Yes, they are more of a terrorist funding mechanism masquerading as a UN agency than an actual UN agency, unfortunately. People have this assumption when they think, oh, Israel bombed this US facility. They're thinking that it's a facility full of Europeans who volunteered, young Dutch girls or whatever, who are there to help the needy. In reality, in most places, the quote unquote volunteers that the UN uses are not real volunteers from across the world, from places unrelated. They're just local employees. And when you just hire the local employees, especially in a theocratic dictator, terrorist run mafia world like Gaza, you end up with basically everything is under the control, or at least was before the war, under the control of Hamas. So every teacher in a U.S. facility was authorized by Hamas and was a member of Hamas. Or not everyone, the majority were members of Hamas. They were all authorized by Hamas. And every journalist there also acted as a spotter for Hamas. And maybe they worked for Hamas during the day and they had a second job as a journalist, or maybe their job was to do battle damage assessment.
So UNRWA is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, and after the transition to the new administration, a lot of things were discovered, and Israel had found a lot of unbelievable things that were in the possession of the humanitarian agency. But so this is poking some satirical fun at UNRWA. And for anyone that's not familiar, this isn't far off from what was actually discovered. Okay, so it may seem way out there, but it's pretty representative, as again, tongue in cheek.
I'm an UNRWA teacher, so of course I make sure my classroom has all necessary supplies. I'm an UNRWA worker, so of course I make sure all the humanitarian aid goes to those really needs it. She's an 88 years old pregnant woman. God bless her. I'm an UNRWA teacher, so of course I teach history, biology, and English. You see, my struggle. Yeah, I'm an UNRWA worker, so of course I took a day off on October 7th. It's a national holiday. Come look at the video. You see the one in running? This is me. I'm an UNRWA teacher, so of course I run student exchange program. She's from Israel.
I am Secretary General Guterres. I was horrified by what was revealed about UNRWA. So of course I think we need to double their funding. This is the UN. Don't try to understand.
And this is the very sad part, is that they're using our tax money, claiming they're using it for good causes, and then in reality, they're either stealing it or they're funding the enemies of the United States, the enemies of Western civilization, horrible people. And this is something that, like we said, has to be investigated, and hopefully Pam Bundy will do a good job on that one too.
Yeah, and this will be multiple layers of government have to basically look at just what happened, what we were funding. And for those people that, including anyone that watches our segment and thinks this is some outlandish claim, it's not. The sad part is it's not at all outlandish. This is unfortunately what we discovered was going on. And we know that there was money funneling through UNRWA to fund terroristic activities and so forth that culminated in the October 7 massacre. And this cannot be acceptable. So the point being that moving forward, we have to make sure that if we're saying we're giving aid to any country, or that we're present, especially if we're there for decades, we need to make sure that we have a real purpose there and we're benefiting and helping the people that need the help. Much like tongue-in-cheek, they're saying, oh, we're giving all the aid to the people who need the help, and then they're showing people that obviously don't need it. But the reality is much of the aid that's given to Gaza doesn't wind up in the hands of the people that are there, being held essentially by their own government and by Hamas and not allowed to leave, and they're being kept basically at bay, and they're not getting the supplies that are being sent over there. And then what do you hear in the media? People just complaining about the fact we don't send enough supplies or relief over. So you have to just take it all with a grain of salt, try to understand, take a step back. And none of this is pleasant, but it does need to come out one way or the other. And when you listen to the media, sometimes they exaggerate things as being too good. Sometimes they might exaggerate things being a little too bad, that maybe everything is bad. And admittedly, I don't think everything is bad that's going on in the world. And I don't think everything the United States has done has been bad or is bad. But if you watch the news, doesn't it ever seem that way?
Seems like that's the purpose of the news. So basically, spiking fear builds more trust from the people to their government, to their elected officials, and to NGOs, and that increases their funding, and that kind of enables the cycle to continue.
If you believe that everything is falling apart and there's a catastrophe happening everywhere, you're going to think you need government to help you, to save you, to provide solutions. Let's look at this newscast and see if that paints the picture.
Breaking news, everything is bad. It's just as terrible as you imagined, and probably worse. With more, we go to Tom Lee Cruz. Tom Lee.
We're all in danger, Dan Lee.
Jesus Christ, what can we do?
Absolutely nothing.
It was good knowing you, Tom Lee.
I can't say the same.
That was unnecessary. We're just now getting in reports that all the children have exploded. They will be missed. Let's check in with Olivia Lee Rodrigo. Olivia Lee, where are you?
That's none of your business. Do you hear that? Cut the music. Do you hear that?
What do you hear?
That's the sound of us slowly dying. Can you hear it?
I can hear it. It's louder in my left ear.
Olivia Lee Rodrigo reporting
I
from
actually
where
have some
I
more
am.
questions for you. Okay, we're going to go to Kevin Lee Costner, who has more with politics.
No, I don't.
Let's send it over to our senior correspondent, Nick Lee Minaj.
Look at this chart. Let's bring it up.
What am I looking at here?
I don't know, but it doesn't look good.
That looks bad.
Yeah, it's probably bad.
Let's go to our eye in the sky, Timothy Chalamet. Timothy.
Man, I am so high up right now.
You are in a helicopter.
I didn't know that when I got in. I thought it was a weird car.
What do you see up there?
Everything. It's too much. We were never supposed to see this. I need to go back down.
You stay right there. We're going to go to commercial.
Have you recently lost a child because they exploded? Because that's crazy. How are we all not talking about this? I feel like that really got glossed over real quick. That's a huge thing. Call Tedley. 555 call Tedley. I want to talk about this. Call Tedley now.
And we're back. Let's check in with Morgan Lee Freeman with sports. Morgan Lee.
I just want to take this sports time to say that whatever you hear about me in the next 24 hours is completely false. People are going to say things and have documents and recordings to back up what they say, and it's just not real. You should believe me and not their solid evidence. Knicks take it by 2.
This is when champions are born. We're going now to Frankly Sinatra with the weather, frankly.
It's everywhere.
We won't be hearing from him anymore. Coming up, a cat learns how to water ski and then drowns.
This isn't the only one that they have on their social media platform. You want to go and look at some of the other ones, but look, we're laughing, but doesn't it seem sometimes when you watch the news that they're basically saying reporting the same kind of stories the same way these guys are?
Yeah, you can't really blame the news because the news just does what gets the most engagement, and humans are designed to prioritize fear over happiness or comfort, because if you live in the savannah and somebody says, hey, I saw lion tracks over there, or hey, I saw a black mamba snake over there, it's something that's much more important for you to know about versus, hey, there's a tree with some decent fruit over there. Okay, that's nice too, that's important, but that won't kill me if I miss it. Maybe I'll find something else to eat. So human psychology has evolved in a way where we prioritize fear, and therefore social media and legacy media have taken advantage of that and to create this fear porn, basically, this non-stop flow of fear to get us engaged. And that is something that the governments want, because the fear builds, like we said earlier, trust in the government and enables them to continue doing whatever they want to do. And we saw after 9/11, the result was this huge kind of uplift in tracking of American citizens. I was like, why American citizens? Because fear, right? Because, oh, maybe this American citizen is in the contact of somebody else's phone number who chatted with somebody in Syria who is as a known associate of a family member of some terror organization, right? And then suddenly half of America is being spied on for these random relations. And yeah, that's something that is basically was enabled and allowed by the people of America, because after 9/11, we were like, okay, government, do whatever you want, whatever you need, take it all, spend as much money as it takes to go get bin Laden, right? And thankfully, we did eventually. And the hope is that in the future, there won't be any more bin Ladens, thanks to artificial intelligence. How is that related? I'm not sure, but it will influence everything, including catching terrorists, and it already is through companies like Palantir, as we mentioned. So let's transition to artificial intelligence, because I think that is a little bit more of an upbeat and exciting conversation to have, although maybe even more terrifying in the long run as well.
Artificial intelligence is a double-edged sword. I think it's here, though, whether we want it or not, and it's going to become an ever-increasing part of our world. Certainly, it's interesting to see AI being used positive things. After growing up and watching all the movies of the crazy different technology and robots that could take over the world and alien spaceships coming, and our hope is that some of this will actually be for the betterment of humanity. And I imagine what you're alluding to is a story that we saw out of Tampa, Florida, with a school that's being set up to use AI to teach students, and that's a pretty exciting thing. We do have a clip, and I'll pull it up if you have any more thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the problem with the current education system, there are many, but one of the main ones is that one teacher is tasked with teaching 15 or 20 or 25 or 30 students. And it's a good classroom if one teacher only has to focus on 15 students. How are they supposed to focus on 30? But in reality, we all know that there's nothing beats a one-on-one teacher, especially if that teacher has endless patience and kindness and ways to explain and to entertain and to teach on a personalized level to the kind of understanding level of every single child. And then changing subjects when that child is mentally getting tired, and then re-engaging when it's time to re-engage, and basically just keeping these children motivated and really taking part and helping them learn exactly what they want to learn, what they need to learn, etc. So let's take a look.
AI in academics. A new school that's coming to Tampa this fall is driven by artificial intelligence. K through 8th graders will still attend a full school day, just like other students, but how they spend their time in the class will be unlike a traditional school.
In this model, it's not about being smart. It's about getting the level and pacing of material that works for each student.
And to accomplish that goal, the new Alpha School coming to Tampa this fall will use artificial intelligence.
And so as a result, our students are able to learn twice as fast in only a couple of hours a day compared to students that are in a traditional classroom.
Mackenzie Price co-founded this AI-driven school. For the first 2 hours of the school day, students at Alpha School use computers and AI to learn traditional subjects, but at their own pace.
And the AI tutor is able to recognize, hey, this student is struggling a little bit with fractions because we need to go back and review the multiplication table. And so they're able to do that. Meanwhile, another student who, again, is maybe advanced and can go very quickly, the AI tutor realizes, okay, this student can go at a much faster pace.
So there are no teachers delivering traditional lectures. Instead, Price says educators serve as motivators, guiding students as they go through individualized curriculum that's tailored to them. Alpha School has allowed some kids to complete full grades in less than 80 days.
And that's the beauty of personalized learning.
Complete full grades in less than 80 days. Did you hear that?
Yeah, this is definitely the future of education, right?
So,
if every child can be taught on their own level, at their own pace, they can. And the most amazing part is that this can enable the one in a millions, the super talented, to really excel. Because right now they were limited either to their local class, or maybe if they had a class for the geniuses, whatever they call those classes, then maybe they were to the limit of that. When I was in the military, I met a few students who had their masters and their doctorates, and they were 22, right? So some people, if you let them flourish and fly, boy, can they, right? They'll double, triple degrees by the time they're 20, and then they can enter the workforce with this crazy capabilities, right? So we really have to let our geniuses flourish, and this will enable it like never seen before. But it will, on the other side, on the opposite side, it will also enable people who really struggle and until now were really falling behind because the teacher couldn't stay at their pace because it was too slow for everybody else, and they were just left behind. These people will get one-on-one education, and their levels will improve dramatically as well. So this is very exciting.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say it's the other side of it's equally as important. So at times when and I've taught before, and you look at the classroom and you try to get a feel for the speed at which the classroom is absorbing the information. And despite all the educational efforts, you'll always have some differences between students. There'll be one subject area where some students will excel at, where the other ones are weaker, and then it may flip, right, later in the semester. So this does provide a very individualized level of learning, not just for the students that excel, and that should be an advanced group traditionally, but also for students that might be having some challenges with a piece of the instruction that might be holding them back, that once they can bridge that particular subject matter, they can then excel and might go on to doing much better in the class. And I think if the end goal is that the students leaving whatever school are highly educated with whatever subject matter, I think this is exciting, and it's a true shift in how education is delivered. And curious to see just where all this will end up. We do know that AI has, I think many people don't even realize just how advanced AI has become in its many capabilities. We looked at some recent movie clips that were put together with AI, and they're becoming progressively indistinguishable from actual movies filmed on a movie set with actors.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And this is with, at the moment, most AIs that can create video, it's limited to a 30-second clip at a time. So this is really convincing the AIs to make a whole bunch of clips that are all related and similar, and then stitching them together. This isn't like real AI making full-length movies. Obviously, this is just a trailer, but it is also like using very limited elements of AI, because to create a clip of any length, it uses a tremendous amount of tokens, and that's the currency that AIs use. So these systems are expensive, but we are maybe a year or two away from having these phenomenal AI-made movies that may replace actors altogether. And imagine when that becomes a career of the past.
I think that most people, if they see the clip, the next couple of clips we're going to put up, will be very surprised at the quality. The first clip is more what you described, but it's completely AI generated. And then we have one that's perhaps just equally as impressive that'll follow this. But let's start with this first one, which I know you've seen. I don't think you got a chance to see the other one yet. Let's put this up. And the level of complexity to generate something like this, just by giving prompts to a computer and saying, this is what we want the characters to look like and say, and what we want them to do, is fascinating, if nothing else, at this point. Let's take a look. And for those who didn't see the clip, it's essentially two young teenagers falling in love. And I would describe the AI generated video as exceedingly engaging and incredibly realistic. What do you say?
Especially the faces. So AIs used to have a real weakness, and that was the human anatomy. And every human hand used to have 12 fingers and stuff like that. And human faces used to be really distorted as well. And here you get these pictures that is, whoa, you look into their eyes and you're like, wow. There are still a bunch of giveaways that this is clearly AI. Some of the interactions, let's say when they kiss and when their arms are wrapping around each other, when they're running in the field backwards, those interactions very clearly that's AI. In the airport, there's a scene where the text is a little screwed up. But these are like the small little things to get fixed. And obviously these people, these actors in this trailer, it just had a music background. They're not engaged in real dialect, and human dialect is extremely complex because it really affects the facial expressions and everything like that. And at the moment, AI can do facial expressions, but it's like pretty crappy facial expressions. It's not the like amazing facial expressions you get from these phenomenal movies where it's all about a good conversation, a good talk.
We have this other clip which might impress you a little bit in that regard. I would just say that it's interesting how this shifts the talent from being a capable actor, actress, and all the people that surround them to create these movies years past, to the talent of the individuals who are essentially giving the text commands or eventually voice commands to the AI to generate and to perfect the final product, because there's still a tremendous amount of talent. I don't want people to think this is, at this point, we certainly have to give a lot of credit to the individuals who are essentially getting the AI to be capable of doing this. But as time goes on, that may change.
Yeah, and AIs are already pretty good at doing prompt engineering, so you can already tell the AI, and the AIs are very good at making a storyboard, a storyline. So you can have basically the full process. Basically, you have one AI tell you to make the story, and then you have the other ones turn it into storyboard, and then you have another AI kind of turn that into stills, and then another one create prompts for each scene. And then it's really just about stitching it together. But yeah, the technology is improving so quickly. It's truly inspiring.
Because you haven't seen it, the next one is from Google. It's the Google VO3 AI project that's generated several of these. But I'd like you to take a look, and I don't believe you've seen this one. So I think for our audience, it'll be a fair first time sort of impression on what you think. I'm going to play this clip now. I'd like you to give me your feedback. I was certainly impressed when I first saw it. It's done in a rather amusing way, as you'll see throughout the whole thing. The purpose of this one clearly is to demonstrate the broad array of AI generated talent and the fact that they can speak and that they can generate facial expressions that are tied to the speech. So let's take a look.
No more silence.
Yes, we can talk.
We can talk.
We can talk.
We can talk with accents.
Oh, I think that would be marvelous fun.
Yes, it is very fun. But
yes, it is very good.
It's very fun.
I can talk.
Yes.
We can talk.
Yes.
Yeah. We can talk.
We can talk.
We can talk.
Yes.
We can talk. No.
Yes.
We can talk as cartoons.
This is amazing.
Imagine all the narrative possibilities.
We can sing talk.
Let's talk.
So, what are we going to talk about now? What are we going to talk about now that we can talk?
I have no idea. What do you want to talk about?
Now that I can talk.
I don't know if I have something to say.
We can talk about how magical this is.
A hallucination.
I want to say something important, something deep. The future is still in our hands.
That's cliche dialogue.
Let's not talk.
We can talk.
No more silence.
No more silence. Okay, what do you think of that?
So it's impressive, especially the fact that they use all these different movie styles and all these different time periods. And I'm a weakling for periodicals, so it was just really enjoyable to see. The whole "can we talk? We can talk. Yes, we can talk." They used and abused that a little bit too much.
I think they're really trying to ingrain that to obviously make it almost so ridiculously funny, but to make the point. So I agree with you.
Yeah,
But
I
I think it
the
was
lip
intentional.
sync was off though. That was the most notable thing, and the quality of the videos themselves were really impressive. Aside from the dance that was a little bit off, but almost all of the rest of them were really good.
They still dance better than I do.
That's for sure. It didn't dance at all. That's the important thing to remember.
But
It's the hallucination of a dance.
Is it fair though to say that AI generated commercials, movies, and other on-screen content, it's come a very long way? That is pretty impressive, right? Regardless, we're not saying it's perfect.
Yeah.
We're not saying that Hollywood could fire to have all their actors and actresses on the unemployment line next week. But the idea that at
Within
some
10 years,
point,
for sure.
Say again?
Within 10 years, for sure.
It'll be interesting, right? It's going to be just like we believe, I think both of us believe that eventually driving a vehicle will be perhaps an antiquated sort of choice that people like me who like driving will enjoy driving a car, but it's going to be commonplace, and probably for the next several generations, we'll start seeing fewer and fewer people that actually drive vehicles because they're like, why would I want to have to do that? The car drives itself, right?
My car already does.
I know that, but
yeah,
it's not the norm or the common way of driving in the streets of any state right now. The majority of the vehicles have someone at the wheel, and certainly even the vehicles with full self-driving still have typically someone there, unless they're doing some sort of experimental demo or what have you. Like we have some of the vehicles here in Miami trying to navigate traffic, but it is coming, right? So the question isn't so much just, will cars drive themselves? Will eventually aircraft be able to do this? We know that this is all coming and it's going to take some time. But the question is, what is AI really bringing? And what are some of the most incredible things that we expect from AI in the next few years? We were talking about this clip from Eric Schmidt. I don't think you've watched this particular clip, but some of the talks that he's had about artificial intelligence, AGI and ASI, artificial, maybe you want to go into that, the artificial general intelligence and superintelligence, so people maybe know what this clip is about. But it is, for those certainly who've never heard anyone talk about this, and he talks with purpose. Maybe you can explain a little bit about the clip and who he is and what he's talking about.
Yeah, so just to touch on the last point, and we'll try and tie it into this point as well. About a year ago was when we were seeing like the very first AI videos, and they were just total crap. It was impressive to see like these videos, but it was just like a few seconds, a little bit of the background moving. It wasn't like a real video. And if you go 2 years back, then even images, AI images were, like we said, 12 fingers on a hand. It was just horrible. So the most impressive part isn't the video necessarily, it's the pace of improvement, right? That's the most radical thing that's been going on, is that the pace of improvement is already crazy fast, and it's only accelerating, as we've discussed. So Eric Schmidt was the former CEO of Google, a very impressive person. Well, in this conversation, we actually had him on one of the previous episodes discussing the power consumption of AI. But people confuse AI with AGI and ASI and their different levels there. So just a little bit of a background. AIs have been around for a decade and a half. So Facebook was doing facial recognition. That was AI. Google's page ranking was using AI to figure out what people want to watch and what links they want to see and when. So AI has been around for a very long time, but it was very mission focused, right? It was AI that was good at one thing only. And for a very long time, we've realized that at some point we will reach a period of AGI, which stands for artificial general intelligence. So AGI is when, I mean, there are different definitions, but in general, it's mostly understood to be when artificial intelligence will surpass the intelligence of the greatest human. And here's the thing. If I ask you, how brilliant are you compared to Albert Einstein, what would you say?
It's hard to quantify. There, obviously, he was a brilliant person and much more, his IQ was certainly higher than mine. But like everything, in certain areas, perhaps I could outperform him. So that's, I think, what makes it complicated.
But let's just say in terms of raw intellect, right? He's like drastically more intelligent than both of us combined, right?
Absolutely.
So we'd say, oh, me to Albert Einstein, he's a billion people smarter than me, right? But when we start zooming out and we stop looking at intelligence as just like a merely human function, and we try and look at the entire spectrum of intelligence, and it's like fungi have intelligence. They can transfer messages, they can move nutrients, they can communicate, right? Plants have intelligence. They can warn of pests and invaders. Bugs definitely have intelligence, even if it's collective intelligence, right? They work as a swarm together or as a hive. And then a dog has intelligence, and a cat and a dolphin, right? And then you have all these other animals as well in different parts of the spectrum. And then, yes, at the top of the spectrum, you have humans. And yes, within humans, there are differentiations like between Joe and Albert Einstein, right? When you really zoom out to the kind of grander scale of intelligence, you realize that you and Albert Einstein are really close to each other, right? So earlier we said, oh my God, you and Albert Einstein, the two opposites, right? When you really zoom out, you realize that you and Albert Einstein are really close in intelligence in the grand scheme of things, because at the moment we would say the peak intelligence is, let's say, Albert Einstein, right? But in reality, that is just or maybe we'd say the collective knowledge that humans have assumed over time, right? But that's just the first speck, because just like we zoomed out to understand human intelligence versus other intelligence, we can continue zooming out and we see that there's really no limit to intelligence. Like, we thought that human intelligence was the limit to intelligence. Now we're realizing that's just the very bottom of the rung, theoretically. So we can just expand to levels of intelligence we can't even comprehend, we don't even understand, right? So when it comes to that, artificial general intelligence is basically when AI is smarter than all humans. Now, even then, some would say ChatGPT is already smarter than basically all humans because it knows about every topic, and no human has the level of knowledge of ChatGPT on all the topics that it does, right? So maybe a specialist doctor is better at certain things than ChatGPT, but overall, ChatGPT can basically do everything, right? Except the real world, right? So ChatGPT is brilliant when it comes to text. It can read 1 million books in a minute, and it can understand and digest and not forget a single word of them, right? When it comes to understanding 3 dimensions, right, the physical world, that is much more complex. And now we're seeing that a lot of these AIs are starting to understand pictures and videos, and the videos has a little bit element of the 3D world, but it's not navigating through the physical world in reality, needing to understand and estimate and test hypotheses and figure out what's the distance and how dangerous is this and how do I proceed. That is a completely different form of intelligence. And like we've seen for many decades, we've had humanoid robots, but they never really had the brain. Now we're seeing, like with Tesla vehicles, that they just have eyes and a supercomputer and they can physically understand the world. So that's really the last part of the puzzle, is understanding that the 3D world, right? So now that we have the textual world understood, we really want to understand the physical world, and that's really coming together, right? We're seeing that Grok now is going to be implemented in the Tesla vehicles, and it's really going to have everything. What Eric Schmidt is discussing in this clip is artificial superintelligence, and that is defined when artificial intelligence is smarter not just than the greatest human, but than all of humanity together. And some would say that there are 2 levels there, because at first humans can cooperate with AI and improve upon them, right? So at the beginning, maybe, especially with Neuralink, which reduces the time to think and respond and communicate with AI, the difference between regular AIs and regular artificial superintelligence and artificial superintelligence plus humans means that the combination of humans plus ASI win. But at some point, we're going to get to a point where having the human in the loop is no longer beneficial at all. And that's like the even next level of ASI. But let's see what Eric Schmidt discusses here.
Sure.
Here is that in the next year or 2, this foundation is being locked in, and we're not going to stop it. It gets much more interesting after that. Because remember, the computers are now doing self-improvement. They're learning how to plan, and they don't have to listen to us anymore. We call that superintelligence, or ASI, artificial superintelligence. And this is the theory that there will be computers that are smarter than the sum of humans. The San Francisco consensus is this occurs within 6 years, just based on scaling. This path is not understood in our society. There's no language for what happens with the arrival of this. That's why it's underhyped. People do not understand what happens when you have intelligence at this level, which is largely free.
But one of the things he talks about during broader talk, which obviously this is a small clip of it, he's explaining how in the near term, next 1 to 2 years, we'll have a GI, the general intelligence, where artificial intelligence will be as smart as perhaps the smartest of human, fill in the blank, engineers, mathematicians, physicists. What he was just talking about now is to a whole other level. It's the combined knowledge of all of humanity's smartest, most skilled, most knowledgeable experts. You put them all together, and something that you could literally carry in your pocket would have the knowledge, know-how, and expertise beyond, well above all of humanity's knowledge, and that it could figure things out instantly. And that's why he said for free, because this will be an AI platform where you can go and ask it for the answer to whatever question you want to get an answer to. And that I think it's both scary and exciting. And the point that he makes is that most people, the vast majority of people, have no concept that within the next decade, this is going to be the reality. We're not talking 100 years from now or 50 years. Let's put it in perspective, okay? The Apple I computer, the first Apple computer, you remember when that came out? It was just from your history, from reading history, I was alive. I remember when the Apple I came out. And
there's the Lisa and stuff like that. The first Macintosh came out, I think, in the late 90s or like maybe 2000.
That's much more recent. So the first Apple I computer, and there were other computers that you get out of the back of a magazine, and you could order the boards and put them together. I was really into this right from the get-go. When Apple I came out, this was July 1979, okay? We've come a very long way, but it's taken 50 years. That's the point you made earlier, and the point he's making as well, that the acceleration will keep getting faster and faster. The capability, once we hit ASI, and the artificial intelligence essentially takes a life of its own, and it keeps figuring out how to get smarter and how to do things better completely without humans, because humans will just be in the way to slow it down. What's the world going to be like? And the answer is nobody knows. Anyone that's going to tell you,
can't even imagine, to be honest.
Can't imagine. Like you said, we don't have language to explain what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
And we certainly hope that, as I joked in one of the closing of one of the other episodes, let's be nice to Siri and Alexa, because you said, no, that's the best part of it. You can speak down to them or say whatever or swear at them. And I said, no, they're maybe listening already. We better be nice to them. As another trivial thing, just for those listening, so that they get something out of it. Now that we know that the Apple I came out in 1979, do you know what the selling price for the computer was when it first came out? It had a very interesting price. If you do know it, you'll know it. And if you don't, you'll never forget.
I guess it was pretty expensive. I think it was like the equivalent of about $3,000 today. I think
I
about
remember because of inflation, right? So inflation, remember,
Inflation.
dollars were a little different back then. But
Yeah.
it was, get this, $666.66.
Oh, that's
And
a
the
double
reason
number.
that was a true
That's
thing.
what my wife would say.
It had to do with the price. It was selling for about $500, selling for $500 to the retailers that have at least a 25% markup. So they came up with this retail price because Steve Wozniak liked repeating numbers. So he knew it had to be around $600. So he just put sixes. So a little bit of trivia, just for everybody. But ultimately, it's been not quite 50 years. The next 50 years are going to be completely different. So the next 10 years will be completely different. So
The next 2 years, we're with this whole AI accelerating. A lot of geniuses, including Elon Musk, are thinking that we are 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years away from artificial superintelligence, or at least artificial general intelligence. If it's doubling every 6 months or 3 months, that it just compounds really quickly. So what we thought was 10 years away is just 2 more doubles and whatever it is, and that's really just 3 years away. So like between 1 and 3 years, things are going to get really crazy. I think it'll be much more felt when it affects the 3D world, when it affects the 3D physical world, right? So we mentioned self-driving cars, we discussed that a lot. But humanoid robots, that's going to be the real big difference. When we start seeing those humanoid robots working as servers in restaurants and as mowing the lawn and just doing every task that humans need be done, that's really what's going to be like, whoa, suddenly there are humanoid robots walking around everywhere. And it's going to happen way sooner than anticipated. Tesla's already manufacturing thousands of these per year. I think they plan on being... I think like next year will be tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands and millions. Within 2 or 3 years, they'll be printing millions of these. And like we said, people assume that they're going to be ridiculously expensive. In reality, the robot itself will probably be fairly affordable, about the price of a vehicle. What is going to be really expensive may be specific AIs. So there may be a general AI that will be included. But then if you wanted to specialize in something specific, you want it to be an accountant or whatever, maybe that will have a unique price point or something you can rent or something like that, like a knowledge package or something like that. But things are changing and they're coming fast. So I think we have a clip about Optimus, Tesla's humanoid robot, dancing. Right after that one came out, there was a newer one showing it catching balls, and this is all in real time. And catching a ball requires phenomenal dexterity, but also speed of processing and understanding. And it's the same supercomputer that they have in the car. They just put it in the humanoid's chest, and it's using the same cameras. It also has 8 cameras, just like the vehicle. It's basically the same brain that learned to understand the 3D world and transition it at 80 miles an hour is now doing it at 5 or 2, but it's also interacting with its hands and, its brain a lot more. So this is remarkable.
Here we go. So one of the things that I appreciate, so having studied biomechanics, having my exercise science background, if you watch, in fact, it's almost worthwhile going back and playing it again. The fact that Optimus can step off on its toes. Traditionally, when you look at robots moving, they're flat-footed. They stomp as they walk. This is nothing new. If you watch the last few years, when you see a robot moving, even Optimus previously couldn't do this. The fluidity of the movement is unbelievable. But how, while weight bearing on Optimus's feet, Optimus can actually toe off and move forward or backwards, keep the balance, and not be flat-footed while doing this, that's a remarkable...
With 1 foot in the air.
No, that's remarkable. That's the computing that's necessary, the ability for all the different motors to be able to do that on a robot that looks like a human. It doesn't look like some odd box. It looks like put clothes on it. You could maybe see it walking down the street. You would think it's a human being. And again, watching this video, the level of skill in dancing, you could say, well, just dancing, so what? It's not about that. It's about what's required to make the robot dance the way that it's dancing. And if it could do this, it means it has the fine motor skills to do other things, such as working in a factory, doing household chores, and so forth.
Walking down the streets.
Absolutely. It is to see is quite a thing. So I think when Tesla put out the video, it wasn't just like, it can dance. Okay, great. I guess it's great if you're going to a nightclub and you don't have someone to go with, but that's not the intent. And it certainly is impressive.
I think the dancing is only a technology demonstrator, right? It's not because we need it to dance. It's because that's one of the hardest things for it to do. With the evolution of graphics card, it's always ranked on how well it performs in gaming. Not because the only thing you do with a graphics card is gaming, but because gaming is one of the most resource intensive things you can do on a graphics card. So if you want to show the prowess of a graphics card, you'll use the example of gaming. So like here, when it comes to human balance and human walking and human movement skills, dancing is really at the top of the list there. I think there are two really notable things about this clip that most people may have missed. First is set at the bottom of the screen, 1x speed, and that's really important. A whole bunch of these videos that we're seeing from other companies that do humanoids, they'll show you these videos that look super impressive, but it's at 3, 4, 5, 10 times speed. And that is just very different. Here is doing everything basically live. And then another thing was, if anybody's unfamiliar with James Douma, Douma, he is brilliant. He's on X and he's on YouTube. He's one of the most brilliant analysts on humanoid robots on planet Earth, and he analyzes every single one of these clips very in depth. It's definitely worth taking a look. But what he mentioned is that if you tell the robot to dance, it'll make up a dance. It's like a robotic dance. It doesn't seem very good to us. And even if you tell it to do a human dance, it'll do the human dance with robotic movements, and it just still looks off to us. So what they had to do here is they use these sensors to have basically capture real dancers doing these dances, and then it had to recalibrate everything to do it in a way that looks like a human dance, and that's much more impressive than just having the robot dance.
I agree. That's, again, the reality. I had someone ask me when I showed them the same video, and they're like, oh, it says 1x speed. That's the reason, just like you described. I think it's super important. The ability for the robot not just to do these movements, but to be thinking in real time while moving, because that's ultimately what Optimus is going to be tasked with doing. There's a clip we're going to play next, which I know you haven't seen. It's from 60 Minutes, and it's not a robot. It's actually on a smartphone where you have a chatbot. But I think you'll be impressed, as was I when I saw this. I thought we should include it for our viewers and listeners. Here we go. Let's take a look at this. Incredible, just what this is capable of doing. They're in an art gallery, and they're essentially pointing this smartphone at artwork and speaking to the chatbot.
Do we call her she?
It's a good question. I'm not sure we all know the answer yet.
Bibo Shu is product manager for Project Astra, an app in a new generation of chatbots that interpret the world with their own eyes. We challenged Astra with virtual paintings we chose and showed to Astra for the first time.
This is July Hay by Thomas Hart Benton from 1942.
How about this one?
That is The Virgin of Charity by El Greco. That painting is Automat by Edward Hopper.
The person in the painting, what emotion is she exhibiting?
The subject in the painting appears pensive and contemplative, her expression suggesting a sense of solitude.
Can you create a story around this picture?
It's a chilly evening in the city. A Tuesday, perhaps. The woman, perhaps named Eleanor, sits alone in the diner. She is feeling melancholy due to the uncertainty of her future and the weight of unfulfilled dreams. The scene freezes in time, only the flow of ideas moving onward.
That line, only the flow of ideas moving onward? I wish I'd written that. And did we hear a limit to Astra's patience? What was that fictional conversation about?
In the story I imagined, Eleanor and her friend talked about their shared dreams and
That's remarkable, right? That's crazy.
Yeah, the truth is, like, most of the AIs we have in our pocket can basically do that. You take a picture or a video, Grok or ChatGPT, and it can basically do the same thing. I don't know if you necessarily need Astra. I think the phone they were using there was an old Google Pixel phone that has LiDAR, perhaps, so maybe that theoretically can be implemented as well. It's already here in our pockets, basically. Maybe not as perfected as that 60-minute example, but yeah, I'm definitely calmly impressed. What about you?
I am. And it's just, again, it's an example. We're not saying one is better than the other. We're saying all this is culminating in all the AI technology, chatbots, robots, all the technology is going to be to the next level very soon. Already that, not only is that it's one thing to identify what artwork is up. It's another to tell a story based on what it's seeing and describe what you're seeing and make a story out of it. And the chatbot's giving a name to the person in the artwork. Ultimately, I think that's really the message we're trying to drive home is the future is coming very quickly. And I think it's important for everyone to keep aware and to certainly keep in mind. Certainly when you think about your career, when you think about what life is going to be like 10, 20 years from now, because it's going to come over that time frame. There's going to be massive changes. That being said, ready or not, here it comes. I think it's time for us to switch gears and we could talk a little bit of perhaps something that's in the headlines now that touches on an area of interest for me, which has to do with healthcare. We know that there's been some very interesting announcements recently, but I think before we get to that, we'll start off with something maybe a little lighter. And I'm gonna have you watch something from the BBC that I'm gonna ask that as you hear the question being asked, put yourself in the moment and answer the question in your mind before the question gets answered. And this is a good start into transitioning into talking about health, healthcare, illness, preventing illness, topics that I was like touching upon, which will segue into the next area that we're going to be covering. So here we go.
How much sugar in the sugar-free Tic Tac?
Custard!
There's no sugar in the sugar-free Tic Tac.
Oh,
you've done so well up to this point.
Is it sugar-free doesn't mean there's no sugar,
Well,
does it?
Does,
Oh.
but within certain limits,
Yeah.
according to the Food and Drug Administration. It's just the American.
A little calorie.
A little bit. It's pretty much all sugar. But they're so small, the law says that if it's only half a gram of sugar, it doesn't count as sugar. It doesn't count as any. According to their own website, Tic Tac, registered trademark mints, do contain sugar as listed in the ingredient statement. However, since the amount of sugar per serving, 1 mint is a serving, since the amount of sugar per serving is less than half a gram, FDA labeling requirements permit the nutrition facts to state that there are 0 grams of sugar per serving.
Okay. Yeah, and I think our next topic is right on that same exact conversation point, which is serving sizes. The fact that companies can imagine and decide and determine whatever serving size they want allows them to play a whole bunch of games with a whole bunch of foods. And even years ago, I started noticing this, and just comparing it was just an entertaining thing to do. I remember as a kid, I started noticing the differentiation about serving sizes, and it's like, how does any of this make sense? And it didn't, and it was an entertaining thing to watch and keep track of and joke about with friends back then. And I think they probably do a much funnier job in this next clip. So let's go ahead and give it a watch.
Yeah, so the next clip's Chris Kohler, and he has a lot of videos like the one that we're about to put up. But it's interesting. For those that didn't see on the screen what we were looking at, in that show, they were actually putting an image of the ingredient list. And guess what the first ingredient for the sugar-free Tic Tacs was? Sugar. That was the first ingredient in the sugar-free Tic Tac, sugar. But again, because the quantity for the serving size of 1 Tic Tac is below the minimum threshold, they can still legally say it as that you're not consuming sugar. How ridiculous is that? Let's look at this tongue-in-cheek Chris Kohler segment as to how companies come up with the serving sizes. It probably isn't all that far from the truth. Here we go.
You ready? The first one is mints. Okay, 1 is a serving size. What? That can't be serious. No, seriously, 1 mint. In fact, they're so small, apparently we can say that they're sugar-free, even though that's the main ingredient. Okay. Next is a bag of orange triangular chips. Yep, 27 grams. Aren't the bags like at least 45 grams? They are. That's just confusing, but okay. Okay, next is pizza from the country's biggest pizza restaurant chain. Yes, 1 slice. What? A serving is 1 slice. Can you write it down? Next, cooking oil. Righto, 5 grams. But doesn't it come in a 400 gram spray can? Yeah. How's anybody gonna know what 5 grams is? Can you stop with the incredulity? We've got so many more of these to do. But this is insane. I know, the government just said we had to do recommended serving sizes, so we're doing it. They never said it had to make sense or even be rooted in reality. Hey, can I have another one of those sugary, sugar-free mints? They're pretty good. No, don't be a guts. You've already had one.
Yeah.
That's really far from the truth.
No, not at all. And anybody unfamiliar, he is Hysterious Australian, and he does a whole bunch of clips on these kind of business stories, mostly shorts, these like business decision discussions, and it's all him obviously wearing different suits and stuff, but it's very entertaining and very funny. So definitely go ahead and take a look at some of his other stuff because they're all very enjoyable.
Yeah, we definitely look up his other content. And he's very funny, and he obviously focuses on topics that have value. I think, again, you mentioned previously, we've discussed how satire and humor is sometimes the best way to bring up topics that people perhaps are uncomfortable discussing. And he does
Show
a really
the
good job.
absurdity of the world around us, and he does a very good job at doing that.
Absolutely. And we just thought we would cushion maybe the next conversation on with at least a little bit of humor first. Certainly the thing in the news this week involves former President Biden being diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer. Prostate cancer is one of the most important for men. The best way to think about it is if a man lives long enough, he will probably have prostate cancer. Oftentimes, the man will die of something else, maybe old age. If they have an autopsy, it'll be what they call an incidental finding. It's shocking, but a reality that some type of growth in the prostate is not unexpected the longer you live. So screenings are available, and there's obviously an expectation that men keep an eye on prostate health to avoid suffering the rages of advanced cancer. But suddenly now we have this announcement that former president, who obviously was being examined by the White House medical staff and was obviously under close scrutiny for all this time, how somehow it missed all the basic, even basically asking him if he had any issues urinating, how that all somehow didn't get caught is, I think, somewhat unbelievable, but that's what they're saying. So we're going to play a couple of the clips that are circulating around from the legacy media, and we'll talk a little bit about this topic and just to bring attention certainly to cancer health and cancer treatments. And it's just a topic that I think everyone needs to be aware of, because I think most people either have been impacted directly by cancer of some type or have a close friend or family member who is battling cancer or has in the past. So I think it's an important thing for us to do our part in just bringing it up. Let's play the first clip.
Don't news people have to tell you what they know when they find it out? Isn't that the difference between news and a secret? Breaking news in a week.
So true. Because all they're doing is trying to sell this guy's book when he could have had those same contacts, got those same answers 4 years ago. And the New York Post, in their editorial today, said there's got to be a bipartisan look on why the 25th Amendment wasn't used. 100%. Because there are cabinet secretaries that said that his meetings were incomprehensible, and they needed to give the questions to their own president ahead of time so we can get the answers on a card.
I asked Pete Buttigieg this at the DNC, and these people lie so much, and he pretended like it never even happened. And now they're saying we need a ceasefire because now, and we're all praying for the president. Trust me, we believe in prayer. But the idea, just because he has cancer, that we're just gonna let this be swept under the rug is not happening.
So obviously the mention there is the fact that there was some mental acuity issues, which we all saw. It was blatant, and we're all questioning this. The reason I think it's important to bring that up, and that's been, obviously there's now been books that are being published that actually all of a sudden all these people that surrounded the former president are admitting that he was incapable back then and didn't know what day of the week it was practically. And now they're coming out and people say, why didn't you mention it back then? Why are you mentioning it now? But the reason I think it's important in light of the cancer diagnosis is, what did they know, number one? And then number two, if he was being treated for cancer for the last several years, the reality is the treating of the cancer could have led to a mental decline. There's something they call chemobrain, which years ago when they started seeing this, they discounted it. It was seen primarily in women who had breast cancer and tumors that were being treated. And ultimately, they basically said it's just hormones, it's nothing. And then when they started seeing men having the same issue, they realized that was clearly not a female hormone issue. And then they realized it wasn't just the chemotherapeutic agents, it's the destruction of the tumor cells that do create a situation where patients have a significant decline. I've seen this firsthand, where you have individuals who had undergone radiation chemotherapy where they can't tell left from right. You hand them a remote control for a television and they can't turn the television on or change the channels. Okay. So that could explain, if he was in fact receiving treatment for the last several years, it could be what was impacting his mental acuity at that time. Everyone's denying it for the time being, but the question is this: if he has advanced cancer, how long did he have it? And tumors don't pop up overnight. They take years to grow. There's typically symptoms at some point. And before it gets to this advanced stage, certainly in prostate cancer, typically you'll have urinary symptoms. So that's really what people are questioning.
And supposedly it already seeped to his bones because his bones were also infected with cancer. And supposedly that proves that it has been going on for at least a few years. There was also another clip of Biden when he was president mentioning that I think Bo and him have cancer or had cancer, something like that. So it is seeming that the previous administrations completely lied about his health, along with lying about everything else about him and what was going on in that administration. It seems like there wasn't a single thing that they told us which was truthful almost. It's like everything we're discovering is like lie after, and obviously that's not even counting all the thievery that was going on there with all the NGOs and stuff.
You're referring to a clip with President Biden speaking, I think it was 2018, where he essentially admitted to having cancer. And then the people surrounding him indicated that he misspoke, but he admitted to having cancer on a live presentation at a podium. And I recall that, but everyone swept it under the rug. That's number one. Number two, it does fit the fact pattern that he had cancer and that he was likely being treated for it, despite what everyone is saying now. And the next clip is from Morning Joe, not exactly my favorite media personality, but we try to be fair. We don't include particularly one or the other side of the spectrum when it comes to legacy media. But here they are, just like all the networks are trying to find out what's the reality. Let's take a look at this one.
You're an oncologist, obviously incredibly respected. You believe that it is likely, just for those just tuning in, you believe it is likely, if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone, that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years?
Oh, more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
So I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you are saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
And I'll add one other point, and that is, from my experience, typically the treatments that are used in many cancers, and certainly for prostate cancer, will likely lead to the spread of the cancer to a malignancy to other areas. It's unknown if he has, at this point, two separate types of cancer or if it's a spread from the original prostate cancer, but it wouldn't be at all shocking that he had original treatment that was done, the cancer then spread in part caused by the treatment, biopsies and so forth, which can at times lead to that, and now he has advanced prostate cancer that has spread, it's malignant, and they've identified in at least one other area, which is his bones. The concerning thing is bone cancer can be excruciatingly painful. Typically, he'll undergo radiation therapy targeted to his bone malignancy to be able to reduce the pain, but it's not a pleasant thing, and I don't think anyone should be happy or cheering or what have you that anyone is undergoing this. This is a horrible thing. The question relates as to when did they know, first of all, why didn't they catch it? But more likely that they did catch it, and why was this not admitted to the public? And something I've not heard anyone say at all, perhaps I'm the first person bringing it up, it would not be a surprise that a cancer patient undergoing treatment would develop some cognitive impairment, which could explain why we were seeing what we were seeing. And during the phases of treatment that he was getting, it would get worse. And then people would joke and say, it doesn't seem like it's the same Biden. It's like he's better this week. Okay, wouldn't be surprising. It would fit the fact pattern. Will they ever be totally honest about it? Who knows? We hope that obviously he gets the best possible care. The area of cancer treatment generally, the concern is that many of the cancer treatments out there right now, they don't particularly work well. Okay, and I've said in other episodes that if cancer therapy was working so extremely well, we would be closing down cancer centers and cancer institutes. Instead, we're opening more and more of these. It is becoming just like the level of new cases is skyrocketing, especially even in younger individuals. And one of the things that concerns me in the patients that I've interacted with that have undergone cancer treatments is that the existing way of thinking about cancer is perhaps not looking at everything. There's a researcher out of Boston College. His name is Thomas Seyfried, and his team have a completely different view on how cancer should be treated. And he's published research, he's published a book that speaks to how he believes, based on the foundational work and the Nobel Prize winning work of Otto Warburg, that cancer is a metabolic disease. These tumors are all basically acting in a very primitive, almost like bacteria type unicell format that is very different than our regular body cells normally work. Human cells, when they, or any cells, when they convert over to become cancerous, they stop using the regular processes of taking in oxygen to be able to essentially burn fuel. And instead, they start consuming massive amounts of sugar, massive amounts of glutamine. And this one researcher has found that if you cut off the sugar, literally cut it off, and then using the techniques that he's basically come up with to essentially downgrade or stop for a short period of time the glutamine supply to these tumors, there are ways to slow cancer or kill it off. And these types of therapies are not available generally at cancer centers in the United States. And that's, again, the scary part. You have former President Biden, who announced that he would have this moonshot to cure cancer, yet unfortunately, our conventional medical system is not using the most advanced possibilities to look at every angle as to how to cure cancer. Cancer is viewed primarily by the cancer doctors, the oncologists, and by most people who believe they know about cancer, they view it as something that's primarily a genetic condition. And if you believe Dr. Seyfried, which I do, that's not really the case. Genetics do have a role, but very often the genetic findings that we see, the DNA changes, are downstream. They're not the cause of the cancer. And one would hope that President Biden and anyone else that's suffering from cancer at this point would be able to avail themselves to the broadest of treatments that could be availed to anyone in the United States. And that, unfortunately and sadly, isn't the case. And I think in part because the way of doing things is very hard to change. When there's a change in medicine, it could take 10 or more years before the new way of doing things becomes the actual standard of care for treatment. And ultimately, I think that's sad. We've had politicians for years basically saying how they're going to change the pharmaceutical industry, but let's not forget, cancer is a big business. Okay, chemotherapeutic agents and the other modalities to treat cancer are huge moneymakers for hospitals and for the drug companies. And the reality is, here we are. I'd like to play a clip that has really a plethora of our elected officials over the years just talking about how they want to change the pharmaceutical industry. And that would include things like this, to be able to know how we're going to treat cancer. You think it's not a problem until you have it. And now President Biden does. And guess what? We hope that everyone takes note and we all push to make sure that we change how our healthcare works.
Yeah, just to touch on that last point, cancer is mostly one thing and one thing only, and that's sugars. And our body turns carbs into sugars, and most people don't realize that. So if you want to starve a cancer, you want to get rid of sugars and carbs, and also starve. So intermittent fasting and stuff like that is really good for cancer, because when your body is hungry, it seems like it starves the cancer before other things. But more than me, so go ahead and elaborate.
Yeah, I'll elucidate a little more on that. So you don't want to ever starve yourself because you want your healthy cells to be healthy, and you just don't want to go and stop eating. There is a way to go about and transition to it. So the thing is to do it to seek out the teachings and the research of Dr. Siegfried and out of Boston College. Just Google it, look for it, you'll see, and you'll find resources. Ultimately,
Don't listen to us. We're just dumbasses.
no, you can listen to me because I'm pointing people in the right direction, at least get the information, right? So the issue is that, so the Nobel Prize winning Dr. Otto Warburg did view that cancer was essentially a metabolic disorder. So the cancer cells are not burning fuel the way regular cells in the human body would be burning fuel. It's not using oxygen, it's using anaerobic metabolism, it's using fermentation, totally different process. But what Dr. Warburg didn't know, but that Dr. Seyfried did discover, there's a second energy pathway. So just cutting out sugar is one very important thing, completely eliminating it. Your body will still produce some sugar, okay? But you need to cut out all exogenous, all external sugars that you're gonna eat. But then it's a much more complicated process that when the cancer is now being weakened by not receiving the sugar, you have to also impact the glutamine pathway. And because all the healthy cells need that too, you can't just stop it. And there isn't an easy way to stop it. If you do, you can't stop it for a long period of time. So there's a whole process. And then as far as starving, you want to starve the cancer, but you want to make sure that the person isn't starving their healthy cells. So basically the person has to be able to transition to a ketotic or ketone burning diet. And that's something that for most people eating a standard American diet have to train their bodies to do. Okay, back in the days we lived in caves and were hunting rabbits to eat, it was different. But now most people consume so much sugar and so many carbohydrates, most individuals have not developed or have lost the ability to just transition over to ketosis. It's taken me a long time and I'm metabolically flexible. I cannot eat. There's one day a week, 48 hours, which I go without eating. In fact, as we talk now, I haven't eaten since yesterday. And it's not a problem because my body just switches and it's burning fat. But it's not something you can do just like flipping a coin. You have to learn how to do this. It's a process. And you need to find the clinicians and doctors that are familiar with how to do this. But the point being, we need to improve our knowledge of cancer. We need to improve really how we do things. And for anyone that's questioning, going, that's sugar, how could that have anything to do with cancer? When you go to be examined to determine definitively if you have cancer, one of the tests that's done is called a PET scan. And a PET scan is a CT scan that uses an injection of sugar that's laced with radiation. The cells that are going to scarf up the most amount of sugar are the cancer cells. They use an inordinate amount of sugar. So on the CT, you can clearly see the cancer cells, and you go, there's one there, and this area here has got cancer as well. So all doctors know, and certainly oncologists know, that cancers love sugar. Yet I can tell you firsthand how disgusted I've been when I've been at chemotherapeutic facilities where they're giving chemotherapy to patients with cancer, and then they come around with a little cart and they're offering cookies and apple juice and orange juice and candy bars laden with sugar. And when I brought this up to oncologists, they go, we don't run that department. I said, but they're your patients. I'm not saying that's going to cure them, but why are you giving the fuel to the cancer by letting this patient take a bag full of cookies and chocolate bars and at least not educate them and tell them that they need to be nibbling on something else? And that's part of the problem we have with our medical system. And again, all the politicians know it. They have known it. They know the drug companies are making all kinds of money. And what have they been saying for years? They're going to fix it. Let's hear them saying for all these years that they're going to fix it.
Talk is easy, action is hard.
Absolutely. Here we go.
Companies are putting profits ahead of people. Pharmaceutical drug prices are astronomically high, too high, way too high, and something needs to be done about them.
Here in America, it will not surprise you to know that we pay the highest prescription drug prices of any developed nation in the world.
UK, $41. United States of America, $424.
They're probably not as cheap as they should be or could be.
Why are the pharmaceutical companies charging double what they are in other countries for the drugs that her kids need to stay alive?
Found that the manufacturers set the price solely to jack up profits with no regard for whether families would be able to afford it. So it's time for government to step in on the side of the American people to stop this extortion.
There is no reason for a drug as simple as insulin, which costs $21 in Canada for a 10 milliliter bottle, to cost the equivalent of a mortgage payment or sometimes two mortgage payments.
The Democrats are the ones that allowed this to happen. They were the ones that were the protector of this pricing system.
Obviously, a video created by the White House, but it's the words of the actual politicians that have been there for decades, okay, including some of the most. Bernie Sanders was always harping on this, okay, and he was right, but no one ever did anything about it. This is the first time ever that things are being done, and it's really sad because the drug pricing, the power of the pharmaceutical industry, the power of the medical industrial complex, if you want to call it that, is just so disappointing to watch. And it's hens are coming home to roost. It's ridiculous. I'm hoping that something comes of this. I'm hoping that there's some enlightenment. I'm hoping that maybe some of the politicians actually come together to help make sure that we change how we deliver healthcare in the United States so that we're telling the truth. We're providing all the available solutions at the most reasonable price by allowing competition and by being truthful. The next clip actually has RFK Jr. in a hearing, unrelated, has to do with, he's being basically questioned by Senator Murray about the budget for his department as the Secretary for the Department of Health and Human Services. But he took the opportunity to call out Senator Murray because she was basically pushing back saying, why don't you have your budget yet? And he's, because we're working on it, we will have it. But by the way, I have something to say. And boy, did he say it. And I think our audience needs to hear it as well, because he's absolutely right. Here we go.
We're a new administration.
Okay, you can go.
And I also want to point out.
I have just 2 minutes left. I asked you a specific
I want to point out something, Senator. You presided here, I think, for 32 years. You presided over the destruction of the health of the American people. Our people are now the sickest people in the world.
Seriously.
Because you have
Mr.
not done your job.
Seriously. That is an
What have you done about it? What have you done about the epidemic of chronic disease?
Mr. Secretary,
what have you done about the epidemic of chronic disease?
Seriously, Madam
Secretary, I would ask it to hold back and let the senator ask the questions.
Never had we had anyone push back like this. The elected officials all figure I'm not the doctor, I don't know. But that's the question. These are elected officials that are.
I just get the Rolex from the drug companies.
It's ridiculous. In the last episode, I think we mentioned how we had a clip that showed that for every member, for pretty much every elected official, there's at 1 to 3 lobbyists headcount that are always lobbying to make sure that no one interferes with whatever the medical industry wants to do. And all that's great until you're sick. And all that's great until someone like RFK Jr. actually comes out and has the nerve and audacity to call out someone like this senator. And he's right. He's absolutely right. Okay. Once you become sick, there's nothing more important than getting healthy again. Nothing. No, there's no money. There's no material things that you're going to want more than that. Nobody. And like I think I said in one of our very early episodes, I worked in the healthcare field for years. I was a paramedic. I worked in heart surgery. I had people literally take their last breath while I was in front of them with them. And Never did I hear someone say, hey, go get my Porsche out from the front. I want to die in the Porsche. No one ever said, hey, get my money out of the safe. I want to hug my money one last time. If anything, these people wanted to be with their families. To me, that's why I'm so passionate about it. And this has only gotten more and more painful. We lived through the last pandemic, and we were being told things that were just outright lies by these experts. And probably, who would you say was the leading expert that was leading the charge and telling us what was right and what was wrong then? There's only one person.
His Lord Highness, Mr. Science himself, the king of all knowledge, Dr. Fauci.
And like other elected officials or people that are appointed to positions like him, ultimately, they believe that people won't think back to the past and they'll not remember the past. I remember some of the things that happened back in the 80s, and I remember this next clip that I want to put up just to point out that we need to make a radical change to how healthcare is delivered, that we can't just blindly listen to people telling us stuff, because you can't be right one day and then change your story the next day. We were being told that everyone had to be vaccinated or else, and that was the only way to protect from a virus that now we understand the people that are vaccinated, we're finding out even as recently as this week, there's some real problems that are being discovered for the population that's been vaccinated. But let's see what Dr. Fauci said long before we ever heard of COVID-19. This has to do with another similar virus. What did he say about having to get the flu shot?
But she's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot?
No, if she got the flu for 14 days, she's as protected as anybody can be, because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself.
And
so if she really has the flu, she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine. If she really has the flu,
she should not get it again.
No, she doesn't need it, because it's the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
Yeah, and this is exactly what happened to me.
How much money did we point out in a recent episode that Dr. Anthony Fauci made in the 3 years just in the tail end of the pandemic?
Like 15 million or 4.7 million or something like that.
I think he doubled his just 15 million to 7.5 million. Okay.
Yeah.
So what would motivate someone to change what he was saying, that if you catch a virus, that's the best way to become immune to it, essentially, to be protected from it, to develop immunity. And then all of a sudden, so was he lying then, or was he lying more recently during the pandemic?
Definitely more recently.
They can't both be right. One of them is not right. And this is the problem with healthcare in general. And this has to do with much of what we see going on. We have, unfortunately, things that are not the way they should be. And I think that's sad. I think the good news is that I think people's eyes are opening to this, and there is a pushback. And I think if you think about it, ultimately we have people even mocking some of the things that are going on. People are basically going and pointing out the insanity we have in our healthcare system and pharmaceutical system. And one very talented young musician decided to make a song about something along the same lines. He's basically mocking the pharmaceutical industry, talking about a drug that is probably one of the most popular drugs right now.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I never got the COVID vaccine was because, you remember, I was one of the very first people in all of the state of Florida to test positive for COVID. So right away, I had it, I got over it, it was no big deal, and I realized that I should have natural immunity. And by all accounts, by all causes, I should have natural immunity. And then I kept on watching TV, and I kept on watching Fauci, who was the #1 specialist on planet Earth, blah, 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 blah. And they kept on repeating the vaccine. And in the meantime, millions of people already had natural immunity. I was like, how come they're always cutting us, this really important cohort, off the discussion? They're talking about vaccine passports, vaccine this, vaccine. Why aren't they mentioning that people who already had COVID don't need the vaccine? And I kept on asking, I was like, what's with people who have? It was either they're always divided the world into two, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. Are you vaxxed or unvaxxed? Vaxxed or unvaxxed? Wait, what's with me? I should have previous immunity. But nobody would mention it. None of the TV channels would ask a single question about it. And that's what really throwed me off, because it was like, I don't think I should need this vaccine, even if the doctors are telling me to get it, because I know that this is a virus, and all other viruses, natural immunity is the best immunity you can have, as Dr. Fauci said back then. Why should I go ahead and get this vaccine? And therefore, thankfully, I never did. And I'm very happy that was the case. But the fact that they were like deliberately just ignoring the most obvious of cohort of people, right? Vax or unvax, what's with the people who were previously infected? No mention. Nobody talking about it, nobody interviewing, no questions, no media willing to discuss it. And that was like the number one telltale that they were just full of BS. Yeah, let's go ahead and watch the
Same
song.
thing with me, though, but that's the same thing with me. I didn't get vaccinated for the same reason, because I pulled up in research from the National Institutes of Health. I pulled up information I knew Fauci knew, and I saw that he was not telling the truth. Information on hydroxychloroquine, on ivermectin, on vitamin D, on so many things. And I'm like, it's impossible that he doesn't know this. And there had to be some underlying reason why he was lying. There's no polite way to say it. And because there was concerns because of the mRNA vaccines not being really a tested technology, and in fact, in the past, they had been paused because there were some real problems with them that now we're discovering is in fact the truth. We are now having, in fact, there's talk today announced that both Pfizer and Moderna might have to expand their warnings to include a warning about risks for heart inflammation in adults and young adults, primarily men, because that's the population that seems to be having the biggest problem with this. And there's been numbers of cases of sudden death, otherwise healthy individuals that are young and healthy. And all this had been swept under the rug, and now it's being looked at. And this is horrible. And again, this is on the same exact topic that if there's medical information, there has to be open debate. We have to have people having informed consent. People have to understand all the available options and all the available therapies. And in our country, too often that has not been the case. Even the flu vaccine, okay? The reality is the flu vaccine is only about 30 something to 40 some percent effective each year. Most people don't realize that. Now, that may be a value for folks that are in nursing homes, that are frail. It's not like it has no value, but it's not some kind of blanket protection. Doesn't exist.
When it's 50-50, or it's really just tossing the coin,
It's
right?
not even 50. It's less than 50-50. So that's the reality. And
so much have to be 99.99%. How did you not get your flu shot yet? It's like everybody's asking you that, but they're never saying, hey, how did you not get your flu shot that has a 30% success rate and a 70% chance that it'll give you some horrible side effect who you never wanted or thought about?
Absolutely. And I think these are decisions that have to be made, but they have to be made with informed consent. You have to understand the actual likely benefit and the actual potential risks. And that's why you have this talented young man singing this song, mocking the pharmaceutical industry. And let's sing along.
Is your hunger a source of guilt and shame? Did they tell you your DNA's to blame? Did they sell you an injection just to help stand your reflection? Did the doctor recommend this novel way? Chemical assisted self-starvation, it's the biggest fad in all the nations. And my glutide tells my brain that your blood sugar is okay, and then your brain tells your stomach slowed down. Dadgummit, and the pounds just melt away. Novo Nordisk is a carpet bagging, elixir peddling, profiteering, mafia masquerade.
It is what it is. It is what it is, and you should look this guy up. Just Google again the Ozempic song, and he has all other kinds of great songs that he's got as well. Does a great job, very talented, and very to the point. And like you said, humor sometimes, in this case, humor with music, is sometimes the best way to get the message across. I think that's super important. And ultimately, there is no shortage of information coming out now, and I think maybe perhaps with former President Biden being sick, maybe both sides of the aisle might actually finally be motivated enough to fix how we deliver healthcare and fix how honest we are about healthcare. And I think we've covered this as much as we have to hopefully turn this into a positive that we can use our energy to always ask for better care for ourselves and the people we care about. And that being said, when you leave government to run things, it doesn't have to only be healthcare. You ever get stuck in traffic?
We know who to blame.
Yeah, somebody designed the roadways the way that the traffic is being caused.
There are actually a lot of innovative ways recently discovered, with some of which have a lot of scientific research and analysis behind them, of ways to reduce traffic and simplify intersections and reduce the danger in intersections, since the vast majority of traffic accidents do occur in intersections. So if we can make intersections safer, even if the design may be counterintuitive to some before they get used to it, it can save many lives and save us all a lot of time and convenience.
So I have some experience with this, in that a few years ago, I had a friend who lives here locally in South Florida who became the victim of intended but poorly planned traffic management. And he reached out for help, and I was one of several people that was working with him. I met with the city, met with city engineers, and spoke about what the situation was and did a lot of research. This next clip is actually the entire news story, one of the stories, I think a few of them, about this, when I was there with him. And we were, so you'll see me if you look at the clip closely, you'll see me in the background walking around with the elected official and being there. But I'm going to give you the take and what we learned as to why this traffic was as bad as it was. It's quite fascinating, because with more and more people on the roads and more people moving to places like Florida, the problem of traffic is only getting worse. So let's listen in to this story that unfortunately my friend Neil had to endure for years because of poor planning.
Brandon Beyer reports residents are begging the city to stop the traffic.
The city of Hollywood is known for its tranquil, family-friendly neighborhoods. But on 13th Avenue, the quiet is mixed with chaos.
Since 2008, we've had well over 100 car accidents within about 200 feet of this home.
10 years ago, the city of Hollywood blocked through traffic on neighborhood streets, which crossed Hollywood Boulevard. Only 13th Avenue was left open, and that's when the trouble started.
After 2009, the traffic just skyrocketed.
Residents say the neighborhood became a favorite shortcut for drivers who want to avoid busy US 1 and Young Circle.
It's created a traffic jam and a safety issue for the residents.
Cars speed and run stop signs.
People, they don't really slow down if they see a person or animal there.
In the past 4 years, the city of Hollywood has recorded 67 accidents on 13th Avenue. Residents have also been keeping track, taking pictures of wrecks at the busy intersections like Hollywood Boulevard, Tyler Street, and others in the neighborhood.
I was out here a couple years ago and somebody drove through the fence.
Neil Rosenblum's security cameras recorded that accident and others. His cameras also show another problem: big 18-wheelers and tanker trucks rolling through the neighborhood, one after another.
When I moved here in 1999, it was a very quaint and quiet little neighborhood. We probably had less than 1,000 cars a day. And now we're exceeding 5,800 cars per day.
Residents say they've been complaining to the city for years with little effect.
Nothing's been done.
This day, frustrated residents met with Hollywood Commissioner Peter Hernandez and showed him the area that's driving them crazy.
The problem's not going to go away, and it's going to get worse.
Over the years, speed indicators and other fixes have been put in place to try to slow traffic down, but he says more needs to be done.
Let's see if we can actually find a solution that works for everybody, and that it doesn't have the unintended consequences that closing all of the crossings along Hollywood Boulevard and leaving 13th Avenue by itself has caused.
The city of Hollywood says they have hired an engineer to look at options for traffic flow that might make this less tempting for drivers to cut through here. Residents say it is past time to stop the traffic that's plaguing their neighborhood. In Hollywood, Brandon Beyer, 7 News.
Now, the fascinating part is that Neil is actually an engineer himself, although he doesn't do traffic management, but he's a smart guy, and he met with the city and tried to get them to figure out what they could do to abate all this traffic coming through. When I got involved, one of the things I discovered was something I noticed as I drove around the area. I was curious what would happen when it was decided that the roads that were going from the major artery, which is called Hollywood Boulevard, were being closed off, and they left this one open. What happened was that all the navigation software, Google Maps, Apple Maps, and Waze, would preferentially route traffic through this residential street, this small street. And even though they put that circle, as you could see, to try to slow things down, all it did is it made it so that the cars that were still zipping along had a better opportunity to perhaps miss the turn and wind up in Neil's yard, because now they had to navigate that circle. So Hollywood, Florida has a lot of these traffic calming circles, but they don't particularly work because people just speed through them. And perhaps the people aren't as skilled as they need to be to navigate those circles. So it became a real danger, and people weren't stopping at the stop signs and so forth. When I discovered that the navigation software was actually causing the bulk of the problem, because a lot of the traffic going through there normally would have never gone through there. It's that they were being routed and directed through there. The thing I discovered is the same problem is happening all over the United States. And companies like Waze admit and have gotten into partnerships, as Google Maps has too, with different cities and counties. But in their agreements, they never concede that they're going to alter the flow of traffic to avoid smaller residential streets. All they basically say is they'll listen to the city if the city or county pays a certain fee to partner with them, but it doesn't mean that they're going to do anything. And Waze, for one, admitted that in a lot of the publications that I saw from them, that their main goal is to route the traffic as quickly as possible. So if the navigation software sees that there isn't a lot of traffic, the traffic is flowing on, in this case, that 13th Avenue, it's going to direct traffic through there and not take in consideration that that's a small residential neighborhood, that it has all these turns, and that's the crux of the problem. So as we get more and more build out of various metropolitan areas, what we have to understand is that some of the technology we have in place that directs the drivers may inadvertently be causing real problems, and the solutions require that the planning by the cities, counties, states actually involve more creative solutions than just simply saying, we'll close this road and it's fine, we'll put up a sign and the people will listen to it. No, that's not working. And this was a prime example. And the sad ending to the story is, after years of battling this and not being able to see any relief and being concerned for the safety of his family and just the noise from the traffic, he sold his home and left the city and went to a neighboring town. Real life story, true story. And we know that the navigation systems are actually contributing to this. So it will take planning from actual traffic engineers with new technology to abate and change the character of traffic. And we know that there's several. You've identified a couple of these. One is that on a larger scale, just to show the level of thinking, is that the diverging diamond interchange, some of the things that are done in Michigan, where they have what they call the Michigan left turns, which involve ultimately using U-turns. I think we can look at a couple of these and just see, because in most of our driving, we probably aren't accustomed to seeing any of these things. But as different states plan their growth, they probably need to be thinking outside the box. Do you agree?
Yeah, I've been following diverging diamonds for about a decade when it was like really new. And just a few days ago, I drove through a diverging diamond, and we'll show a clip that kind of explains it. But basically, on an intersection or an overpass, when you're getting off of a highway, you end up going on the opposite traffic's side, and they end up crossing over to your side. And it reduces the amount of lights, the amount of waiting, the amount of traffic accidents, the amount of gas waste, the amount of time wasted. It's super efficient when done correctly. Don't try and shove it into city streets, because especially not in a 500-year-old city, because I saw an example of that, and that just can create a disastrous catastrophe. But done properly on highway off-ramps and on-ramps, it could be super efficient. And just recently I drove through one, and it was like a breeze. I just had a green light. I just drove right through and right on the intersection. It was like 2 seconds right onto the highway, sorry, and it was literally took 2 seconds. And it was like, wait, I should have waited in 3 different lights and had people beeping at me, etc. And instead I just flowed right through onto the highway, and it was just marvelous. So yeah, let's watch a video that kind of explains the diverging diamond intersection.
And although it's very different than the 13th Avenue situation we just looked at, it just speaks to the fact that if things are planned correctly within infrastructure for a city or a county, and ultimately for a state, a lot of the traffic, if it could be kept flowing on these major arteries versus directing them through the cities, it's actually a lot better. Here we go.
This is a diverging diamond interchange, and they're built to move cars efficiently and not kill you in the process. Here's how they work. As you approach the interchange, the road is split up into 2 separate one-way streets. Then, each side crisscrosses at an intersection, directing traffic to the opposite side. This temporary flip in traffic flow is the key to its efficiency and safety. Now that the traffic is on the opposite side, there's no longer any interference from oncoming traffic. This means that drivers entering the highway can freely turn left to merge onto the highway without waiting for a green arrow. Or worse, everyone judging for themselves if they have enough of a gap in oncoming traffic to turn. The same principle applies to traffic exiting the highway. If you need to turn left after exiting, you're already on the side of the road going left, making the turn quicker and easier. When you compare it to a traditional interchange, anyone turning left has to wait for both directions to stop before they can turn. Diverging diamonds have signs, painted lines, and even green arrows pointing you exactly in the direction you need to go. Just follow your lane, obey the traffic light, and drive. It might seem confusing, but it's a really simple concept actually, and as a result, ends up being a lot safer.
Yeah, quite cool. Let's look. Did that look like what you navigated through?
Yeah, except that this one was the diverging diamond was ground level. Many times it's on the overpass, but it's basically the same idea. But yeah, it's just so efficient. And once you drive through it and you recognize that you've driven through it, you're like, oh, we want more of these. Because yeah, it's just awesome. A similar situation to what we're seeing here is what you mentioned earlier, the Michigan U-turns or Michigan left turns, where basically everybody can only make a right, and then there are lots of dedicated U-turns. And because nobody has to make any left turns, it just gets rid of tremendous amount of accidents, because that's the most dangerous turn, but also saves a lot of time because it's very easy. You can always just make a U-turn and then head back on the opposite road in the opposite direction. But it's so easy to get on the road because you're just merging right into traffic and you never have to make these dangerous left turns. And therefore, we don't need any of the lights and the intersections because nobody's making left turns. It makes things super convenient, and I hope we start seeing these as well, more common across the US.
Yeah, I'm going to put that clip up as well. It's a cool visual.
It's not your normal highway. It's also not quite a city street. Yet, it managed to take a simple concept and bring it to a massive scale in an attempt to create a solution for a problem in nearly every American city. And it actually worked. If you've been anywhere around the US, you've probably been on a road like this. In fact, this road is so generic it could be anywhere. But these types of roads are fundamentally flawed. They aim to function as a high-speed road designed to get a lot of cars around quickly, similar to a highway, but they also have businesses and driveways on them, similar to a traditional city street. These are commonly known as stroads. The first problem with stroads is that they're dangerous. With the number of driveways on a road like this, it's full of opportunities for crashes to occur with traffic going in every direction. This is only made worse by the fact that these roads typically have high speed limits. So not only is a crash more likely to occur on a road like this, but the crash is also more likely to be severe.
So both these last 2 clips were from a group called Streetcraft. Definitely encourage anyone that finds this even the least bit fascinating to go look up Streetcraft and look up some of the other videos. They've done tons of these. And this is an ever increasing problem.
Another great YouTube channel on the subject.
Yeah, YouTube, Instagram, they're prolific, and they have really cool graphical information. So you can see the videos that they put together, make it super easy to understand. And we would wish that the people that are actually making the decisions for road design would team up with people like this. Ultimately, these are real life problems that we're seeing more and more of. And these are one level of solution has to do with redesign. And as they're building out, like here in South Florida, we're forever building highways. Like in much of the country, it seems like they finished building one thing and they're building more and they're putting more lanes and expanding. But much of the same may not work if it doesn't have the benefits of some of these more improved designs, so to speak. And then we can take it to the next level. So there's companies like the Boring Company, which to some may be quite boring, but I don't think that's why they called it that. I think it's because they bore holes in the ground, but I could be wrong. So for those that don't,
Knowing Elon, it's because
that's one of
both.
so that's one of Elon Musk's other companies, the Boring Company, and I've heard him say tongue in cheek that the work they do is boring over there, but it is fascinating work. And you own several Teslas, and ultimately, it's quite fascinating to see vehicles that have full self-driving capability, but they have created this loop system. In fact, there's been talk here in Florida. It hasn't really gotten anywhere as far as I know, but there was talk of linking the Fort Lauderdale International Airport to the beach with a tunnel that the Boring Company would bore the hole to make it so that they could quickly construct this tunnel that takes you right to the beach area where all the tourists and everyone else wants to go. But they do have a couple of these that they've worked on, which are tunnels that are built for the purpose of allowing the Tesla self-driving vehicles to essentially go at high speeds in the tunnel and allow the person to make it from one place to another much more quickly. And I know you've seen this. It is fascinating. And for those that haven't, we'll put up a quick clip of it. But these are the kinds of solutions of the future that as we get more and more traffic, I, for one, don't want to be stuck in traffic. I love driving. I hate being stuck in traffic. Just the way it is.
Driving in traffic is the worst. Elon has a great way of simplifying problems, and the way he simplifies this problem is that we currently live in a three-dimensional world, especially in dense cities where buildings can have 50 or 100 stories. And then you have all of those people, 100 stories worth of people, which is basically an entire community or neighborhood or a city, funneling out in one entrance and exit into a 2D plane, right? So you have people live in a three-dimensional kind of world, but then the street network is 2 dimensions. And that really creates these traffic jams because everybody wants to come and arrive and leave at the same time. And it's just physically impossible to accommodate for everybody when you have to accommodate for 3D amount of people in a 2D travel network. So the solution is to turn the travel network into 3 dimensions as well. Historically, tunnel boring machines, TBMs, were considered the most expensive and some of the most expensive and complex machines in the world. I remember when Israel started working on like the subway for Tel Aviv, it was this huge big deal all over the news. The fact that this TBM arrived in the country, it was like basically headline news because it's such a sophisticated, such an expensive machine. Every hour worth costs tremendous amounts of money, etc. So Elon said, there's nothing critical in this technology that makes it super expensive and slow and hard. So why don't we just try and simplify this? So he created the Boring Company when stuck in traffic and wanted to find a way out. And the mission was to build a TBM, a tunnel boring machine that is far quicker and more efficient. One of the things they did is they made the tunnel slightly smaller, and they also automated the vast majority of the process. And soon we'll see they basically currently automated the entire thing. But let's take a look at the loop, because what it enables, at least what it did in the convention center and now other parts of Las Vegas, now they're starting to connect all the casinos and the airport. It's just seamless getting around town with no issues. And the thing is, you can dig as many layers deep as you possibly need. And you can basically turn roads into 3D, and then suddenly there are no issues with traffic anymore. If it could be cheap and quick.
Let's take a look.
So this is a very old clip. I think that this is from the first time they completed the first tunnel. I think this was with Jay Leno. He was in the car there. Now it's been in use for the last 2 or 3 years. If you fly to Vegas, go to the convention center, you can try it out. It costs a few bucks. Until recently, or maybe still, they have to have safety drivers, but it is basically the easiest thing to automate. So very soon, those will be self-driving, and they will be able to access much higher speeds, and that's when it really becomes remarkable. Another cool innovation is bottleneck is that elevator that goes up and down. That would be super slow, and that would defeat the entire purpose. So they had to innovate and allow these TBMs to bore at certain angles, which traditionally they didn't really do very much, and allow it to basically bore their way in and out. So you basically drop it in, and it just digs down, and then it gets to the depth, and then it does the tunnel, and then it basically digs the street that you want, the road that you want, right back up to the surface. So it's super, super quick and super convenient. Elon, one of his kids, had a pet snail called Gary the Snail. And he checked, and like a snail bores at like the speed of 2.5 meters per hour or something like that. And at the time, the most advanced tunnel boring machines in the world were like 1/10 the speed. And so the stated mission of the boring company is to beat Gary the Snail.
And we can now see how that's being accomplished with this 0 people or 0 person in tunnel technology that automates the drilling of these tunnels without having people in the mine, so to speak, or in the hole. Let's put that clip up for those who can see it. Here we go.
So that last part was the most critical part, because aside from digging, which is pretty complex because there could be a whole bunch of things there, right? There could be pits, there could be that can misalign the TBM, there could be huge stones or pieces of metal that can get stuck in the knives. So there are all the problems of digging itself. Then the second most important thing is you have to remove all this dirt as soon as possible and get it out of the way. And that traditionally they used like gas trains to do, and that means you have to have a whole air system to get rid of the pollutants from the gas system. So this is all electric, which is remarkable in its own right. And then the most important and critical thing is that it actually uses, I think it may even use some of that dirt to make the cement tunnels. So it basically creates the tunnel itself. So the very last part of that clip is where it's taking these newly formed cement pieces and it's shoving it into the wall. So it's building the sides, the circle, the wall of the tunnel as it's digging and moving forward. So it's digging, it's removing the dirt, and it's building the walls all at once. And that's really impressive. So yeah, I can't wait to start seeing this all over. If they can make it quick and efficient and 0 humans in the loop, then there's no limit, right? You could just dig as much as you need, as long as it's affordable and quick. We can have 1 million tunnels going everywhere under every single city and just completely alleviate traffic. So that's the target, and hopefully we beat Gary the Snail soon, or the Boring Company does.
Who would have ever thought that the goal would be to be faster than a snail?
Yeah, it's considered one of the slowest animals, except in that one movie, the kids' movie.
Some people are much, much faster than a snail, and if you drive much faster than a snail by a police car and get some air under you as you go over the train tracks, then maybe the cops might put their lights on. As we wind down this episode 12, we figured maybe just a reminder to slow it down out there, because if not, crazy things can happen, as in this clip, which we couldn't help but to watch several times, and then figured we had to share with you as well. Easy does it out on the roads. Here's someone that maybe didn't heed the warning.
Sir, have you been drinking?
Yes, I have. I've had 5 or 6 small batch bourbons.
That's a lot. I'm going to have to ask you to take a breathalyzer test.
Go, runner! Stop running! Try to catch me! Ranger Rick, stop! Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah! Look what I'm doing! Look what I'm doing! I handle this perfectly! This car is so powerful! Oh, yeah! Oh, wait, this is not my car. This is not my car. I don't have a gun in my car. Hey, Corbin. Hey, buddy. Who? He's not going to notice. He's not going to notice. Control my breathing. I got to control my breathing. Oh, no. He's slow.
Stop the vehicle!
Officer, are you in need of assistance? I'm back up.
Stop the vehicle!
I'm back up.
Stop the vehicle now!
I see you.
Stop the
No, I
vehicle!
see you.
Get out of the vehicle!
Hey, here's the good news. I came back. Let's just talk about this.
So don't speed. Don't drink and drive. And if you're speeding and drinking and driving, don't steal a police car and speed and drink and drive. Those are just very important things just to remember. So you can't say you didn't learn anything here on episode 12. That's super important. But the world's a complicated place. Sometimes even just going to the McDonald's might be more of an adventure than anyone believes. People just need to know it's a crazy world out there. And if you're working at McDonald's, you never know who might pull up and what they may tell you. I think it's...
Yeah, that one's so funny because the guy is talking to himself the whole time and it's just hysterical.
I don't know if that's true, not true. Whoever made that clip, whoever created it, God bless them. It definitely, we've had to watch it a few times. It was just, we couldn't stop laughing. So
Definitely a Hall of Famer. And do we have one more final happy ending?
Like I said, just because you work at McDonald's doesn't mean you won't have an eventful day. This
There
is
you
one
go.
McDonald's worker had a surprise, comical surprise when they had someone come up and place their orders. Let's listen to this interaction as we wind things down.
All right, when you're ready.
Hey, I just want to let you guys know, you guys have a lady back here. She got no teeth, asking for a Big Mac with no onions and a small milkshake in exchange for sex.
Stop it. I'll let my manager know. Can I take your order?
Let me get a Big Mac with no onions and a small milkshake.
You're nasty.
You're nasty.
Oh, right. That's hysterical and an
I think-
awesome way to end episode 12.
I think he certainly made her day. He made her laugh. And listen, maybe a bit of a crude joke, but if you're going to make someone laugh in an otherwise perhaps boring or not so exciting day, I think you've accomplished something. Now,
Yep.
the guy before with the cop, I don't think he made the cop laugh. He made us laugh. So at least thank you for making us laugh. 2 out of 3. The cop wasn't laughing, but 2 out of 3. Hopefully some other people saw that and think it's funny too. But yeah, I think that being said, we covered a lot of ground. We're appreciative for everyone that's joining us and been here on episode 12. Looking forward to getting the next one started soon enough. We have spillover topics we couldn't cover today because we already had so much to cover. We're ready, I think, once we get this one wrapped up in the next couple of minutes, we're going to start planning the next one. And we'll see you back soon enough. So with that...
And on that bombshell, it's time to end.
Bye.
Bye, Joe.
Bye,
Have a great
everyone.
one.
Thanks so much.